A good Girl Scout rule my mother taught me is to leave a situation or place better than you found it. A job of mine in the summers in Ocean City, New Jersey, while I was in high school, was cleaning apartments before the next vacationers arrived. I cleaned up some horrendous messes because I'm sure people believed they paid good money for the place and would just leave their mess for someone else to clean up. This certainly reinforced for me my mother's message, and I do try to be responsible for the places I stay. We actually got to stay a week in Virginia Beach this past summer, and we got a reply from the Verbo place saying, "Thank you for leaving it such good shape." So we tried to do that. The parable of the talents, as Jim said, or gold bag, which that's the first I've ever seen that in or heard that, although that was part of the commentary, is a difficult one, as most of these parables are at the end of Matthew. Jesus prefaces them by saying, the kingdom of heaven will be like this. What? We say, there are going to be people left out of the party like the foolish bridesmaids? That doesn't sound like the kingdom of heaven I believe in. Well, a couple of things I've learned about the Gospel of Matthew. One is that Matthew's writing is usually descriptive rather than prescriptive. And that means to me that, for example, in Matthew 5, when Jesus talks about a divorced person marrying again, and that will cause adultery, Jesus isn't saying that, isn't prescribing this a sin, but describing a condition that is a reality. One can never banish an intimate relationship from one's life. One will live with that and the new one, and that will have to be reckoned with. So it's descriptive rather than prescriptive of a condition. And so it seems to me it is with these parables. Jesus is describing, possibly, as a warning, the consequences of not being prepared or not leaving life better than we found it. The other thing about Matthew's gospel is that it is written to the followers of Jesus after he has ascended into heaven. So these Christians are living in a time between having had the physical presence of Jesus and now not having it and awaiting his return. They think and hope it will be imminent, but we know better. So as one commentator put it, the absence of the master calls for vigilance and stamina. What about the master? Sometimes people have used this parable as a stewardship sermon to talk about multiplying our gifts. Actually, it's more about the shocking superabundance of the master's generosity. As Jim read, a talenton is what would be the talent, was worth, this says it was worth 30 bags of gold, Jim, not just one bag of gold is what yours said. So the master entrusts his whole estate to the servants and then goes away. Kind of reminds me of George Burns and John Denver in Oh God. It's yours now, says God. Take care of it. That was the reality of the community of Matthew, and that is the reality of our Christian lives today. We have been entrusted with the whole estate, and it isn't good enough to say God's in charge or in control, because we are God's servants, and this creation is entrusted to us. This parable is a call to faithful action. So what is ours to do about the environment? Can care for the earth take precedence over oil dollars with the pipeline? Here in the US, can responsible behavior take precedence over personal freedoms of movement and gathering? Can we care for the least of these? Now, I know that's next week's sermon, but can we care for the least of these? Can care for the least of these take precedence over our own comfort and safety? Good for the faithful servants who were rewarded when the master returned. Enter into the joy, Jim read happiness, the New Revised says joy. Enter into the joy of your master. Good for them. But many times I feel like the servant who buried the treasure. Not that I think that the master is harsh or cruel, but my own insecurity about not getting it right, or my fear about the cost of getting out there and doing what I know I should do, gets in the way. I know I have buried many opportunities to be faithful, and in light of the generosity of the master, I feel sometimes like I am in the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So can you see why this is descriptive and not prescriptive? In the depths of our hearts, we know when we have buried opportunities to be faithful and bring abundance to the world which has been entrusted to us. And we know how we feel when we've fallen short. But let's go back to where the master really wants us. The master really wants us to enter into the joy of Christ's presence. This is what the kingdom of heaven will be like. Abundance, a feast, a party. The master wants us to gather at the table. This table is open to all. This table is the remembrance that grace and love win. This table is our spiritual sustenance for multiplying the abundance of creation and community that has been entrusted to us. Today, we celebrate the humble acknowledgement of Jesus Christ as the chief elder of the Moravian Church. This agreement happened in London in 1741 with a small gathering of the Moravian spiritual leaders on the eve of Zinzendorf's departure for what was soon to become Bethlehem. The spiritual heart of the community was the spiritual head of the community was going far away, and the gathering felt it necessary to elect a new head, a chief elder, to manage the growing mission effort in Zinzendorf's absence. Who would be the faithful servant in Zinzendorf's absence? When the decision seemed at an impasse, it was suggested that maybe Jesus would be willing. It was put to the lot, and Jesus said yes. What a beautiful acknowledgement that the master never really was away, and we are to live with the assurance that as we gather at the table, the joy of the master is renewed, replenished, and multiplied. So, faithful servants of Edmonton Moravian, know that as we strive to leave our world and relationships better than we found them, Jesus Christ, our Master and Chief Elder, is close at hand. Amen.